Alright guys, so I'm removing the third row seats out of this GX460 in preparation for putting a flat floor in it. These seats, you lose about 6 inches in the rear and about 8 inches in the front of storage space. So to remove the seats, first thing you do is you pull out these two side trim pieces. They just yank out. They're held in a bunch of little snaps. Then you pull off the stuff back here, a bunch of 10mm bolts. Then you pull off some 14mm bolts. There's actually some right here, and then you got to flip the seat up and get the one right here. But yeah, so they're all unbolted now, and I can just take them out. Look how flat that gets. You can just take them out just like that. Pretty wild. We're going to weigh everything and see how much weight savings we get from removing these guys. They're pretty beefy because, I mean, you're strapping your kids to them, and then luggage also has to sit on top of it. And there's like tie downs and all this stuff integrated into it. So there's a lot of pretty beefy brackets, stuff like this. This is the plate that goes over the back of them. So I think we're gonna have a pretty serious weight savings. Let's do things thoroughly. So the hardest part so far has been getting the seat belts out. You gotta pull this little plastic cover up here. That's the bolt for the little pulley thing. And then as you can see, there's a lot of sensors and stuff in here, so don't be banging around too much. I don't know if that's side curtain airbags or what, but there's a lot of stuff in here. Yeah, who knows what that's for, all in this pillar. But the airbag winch itself sits right there. It's one bolt to pull it out, but you got to pull all this to get to it. So while you're in here, there is your drains for your sunroof. Those are good to check. There's your jack and all that stuff. Very clean truck. Definitely a Florida vehicle. A lot of connectors, I don't know what they do. They don't really go to anything, so I'm sure I'll be using those again. Got to do the same thing on this side. And this side, there's an AC system in there, so it might be a little more complicated. All right, so as expected, this side was a lot more work. You had to pull out this screw and then pull off your grab handle up there, and then you can get this whole panel to kind of swing out, and you can see the monstrosity that is the rear AC system. I'm sure it's extremely well engineered, but man, is it complicated. So I didn't realize there's a vent that dumps out down there. You can see that ductwork. And then there's also a big vent that goes up here, and that's what goes out to those 4 vents. So this will probably get deleted at some point, because man, it's a bunch of complication in here. And you have coolant lines and refrigerant lines run all the way to the back of the vehicle, which I'm never keen on. But at the moment, we're just trying to figure out where the seat belt is. And it looks like it's behind all of this ductwork. Yeah, it's right there. Actually wasn't that bad. This panel, you unsnap it from the bottom and slide it down up from under the headliner. Get that out of your way. And then this vent right here literally just lifts right off that square hole. And then you can get to your seatbelt bolt. But man, there's a lot going on in here to get this thing rear AC. Oh, I wish this thing had an option with no rear seats and no rear AC. Then it would be the perfect vehicle from the factory. Well, if they took that money and then put it into the differentials. I'm trying to figure out how I want to do the floor. Obviously, there's a couple kits that you can buy that just drop in and bolt in. I think they're a little overpriced, to be honest. No point in shipping a piece of plywood across the country when I can buy it down the road. So I'm looking at what are the limiting factors. I want to keep the floor as low as I can to maximize the distance from here to here, right? Maximize the volume in the compartment. Anything I space off the floor, even if it's only 1 inch, that's a lot of volume lost. So the things that are limiting are these little plastic guys. They stick up pretty high. And this support beam and this, whatever this is. I need to look into figure out what the heck this guy is. There is a little dip right here, so I could pretty easily unsnap all these and get rid of the white things and just tape that harness down across this way. I don't know what that harness is. I assume maybe it's taillights. That kind of would make sense. The next limiting thing is these guys. So these 3 are about the same height, but these end ones are a little lower. So definitely want the board to sit flush on top of the seal back here. And then the next question becomes, how far forward do you go with that board? Most of the drawer systems and everything like that recommended for this are 900mm. I got to measure that and see how long that is. I was thinking about putting drawers, and I kind of decided against it. If you put something tall in here, the drawer will get in the way, and it's too inconvenient to unbolt and move. So I'm going to go with the flat floor, and then maybe I'll bolt a drawer to that in a way that I can easily remove it. So let's see how far the seats go back. That's a good thing to check. They don't actually go back that far. So that seat is all the way back. Yeah, so I could really have that board go way farther forward, which is probably what I'll do. Plan is to eventually delete at least those two seats, maybe this seat as well. If you're doing this and you're thinking about getting rid of the second row, good observation is that the passenger side slides way farther forward than the driver's side. So if you're going to keep one, kind of makes sense to keep the passenger side. This guy's got a way longer track, and I was able to figure out this is a proximity sensor for your key fob. So it's positioning there under the seats, I think, is so it can detect when you're opening this back door wirelessly. I set it up for now before I'm gonna have time to make the wood deck. I moved the proximity sensor for your key fob to back here. I added in the factory tie downs to those 10mm holes that were there and there. And then I bolted onto the seat brackets some little chain links just to have some tie downs up front, because you got to tie down your recovery gear. And what I've achieved now is I've removed a lot of weight, and all this is mounted lower down. So I've greatly improved the center of gravity of the truck. Now for the real question, what does all this crap weigh? Let's find out. So we got our scale of science here. Let's just stand it up on there and balance it. I think that probably weighs like 45 pounds. Wow, it's pretty close. 47.6 pounds. So that's about 100 pounds right there. Ugh. Just by removing the seats. And then there's also all the associated brackets and bolts and plastics and guards. So I'd say we removed about 120 pounds. All right, so I cut the piece of wood. I'll give you the dimensions once I get it all done, but I'm trying to see where it's gonna sit. So the first thing I did was I took this wire down here and I dislocated it from these little brackets, and I pushed it farther forward so it can sit down in the lower part of the tray. And once you do that, the board ends up sitting right here and right here. And then it's about a millimeter or two higher than right there, which is pretty great. So almost totally flat. So a lot of people put a bunch of pieces of wood underneath this thing and they make spacers, so it's, you know, sitting on the floor all over the place. I don't really feel like I need to do that because it's a 3/4 inch thick piece of plywood. So let me show you where it sits on the other side. You can see that there's a little bit of a gap on top of the bracket. And by bracket, I mean that cross member thing. So if we pick it up, see that cross member? It doesn't sit flush on that because it's sitting up on the plastic right there. And that's kind of where I want it to sit height-wise in the front, because I don't want it pressing against this too much. I want it to sit up on top of that beam. So all I gotta do is put a spacer in the center, probably about a 1/4 inch. I'll experiment with that. And that's probably all I'm gonna do to support it. I don't intend on having a ton of weight back here. So now it's just decided where I'm gonna drill the holes. So there are a bunch of holes back here that you can use that are threaded from where the seats used to go. All these black pieces of tape are big inserts. So yeah, there's one I uncovered already. I put tape on them to cover them up like I always do, but I can peel it off really easily. So yeah, now I just got to decide where I want to put it. The bolts, and wherever the bolts are, I'll have a spacer. So the bolt will go down through a spacer into that hole. But I really want to make it to where the weight sits on this lip right here and on that cross member, and then you'll have a bolt here, and that's more than enough support. You don't need a ton more spaces underneath there. The reason I don't want to fill the whole bottom of it with spacers and plywood is because I want to put a ton of insulation under this board, because there's actually a pretty big gap, but there's not enough room to really store stuff, right? There's just enough room for about 1 inch of insulation. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it as quiet as I can while I'm at it. So as far as where to drill the holes, go to the center of that hole to that. You're looking at 9 inches. Is it the same on both sides? I kind of hope so. Yeah, 9 inches to the lip right here. Obviously drill your holes kind of oversized so you have some wiggle room. And then the other dimension you'll need, 9 inches will get you one thing, and then we'll go from when you start touching the plastic there, so that's 5 3/8. Right there. 7 5/8. 5 3/8, 7 5/8, and this is 9. All right, let's put the board up there and mark it and drill some holes and see if we line it up. All right, so got our first hole drilled. It was just about perfect. Drop the screwdriver in there to line it up. Now I got that lined up, and I move the board, measure the distance from that hole to this hole, and double check my mark to make sure the spacing on the 2 screws is correct. Because otherwise I can shift the board around a little bit, right? But that spacing's got to be good or I'm going to end up making a really, really big hole. Next, after that, I'll take another screwdriver, go down here, measure the depth before it falls into the hole. That'll tell me the thickness spacer I need underneath it. And that's about it. And I just kind of bolt it all together. Pretty easy. The 2 holes are 36 inches apart, so that was easy. That came out good. It's all centered up and lined up pretty square as far as gaps on the sides. Better than I would expect for me doing it. Now let's see how big of a spacer we need. So that's falling into the hole, but if I go to the edge of the hole, it's that long. So I've got to measure that, subtract the width of the board, and I know what spacer I need. So I did the math. I need a 1-inch spacer under each of these holes. So I got to figure out what I want to use for that, because this board is 3/4 of an inch, which is a little too thin. It'd be nice if it was 3/4 of an inch, and I don't really want to pull the board down 1/4 of an inch. That's a little too much. There's my 2 1-inch spacers. Yes, I didn't go with the grain properly, and it's near not, but they're just spacers, and they're going to get glued and screwed on there, so it'll be fine. And now I'm just going to take them and slip them underneath there. I drilled these holes a little bigger to make sure I had plenty of wiggle room. Put some glue on them, put 2 screws on them, and it's a done deal. Spacers are attached to the wood. Okay, so I stuck these big long bolts in temporarily just to keep everything lined up. Put those 2 screws in. There's some glue in there too. So the spacers are on there good. Now I can pull these out. And I've got to try to find some bolts that are, I think these are M10s, but I've got to try to find a shallow head on them because I'm going to countersink down into here a little bit. But I don't want to go too deep or I'll have a lot of loss of strength. I also might just take a regular bolt like this and just grind the heads down with a grinder, because I don't need to put that much torque on them, right? So probably do a combination of those 2 things. All right, there's how the bottom looks. We got our 2 big spacers up here for our big bolts, and then this 1/4-inch strip spacer right there. That's going to sit on top of this beam here, and you can see how it kind of tapers down here. So measured that the same way. That'll all line up nicely. Before I forget, the final dimensions that I came out with before carpet is 42 by 40 3/4 roughly. Pretty similar size to what you get in the 4Runners. There's how it looks covered in carpet. I admit I know nothing about upholstery, which is pretty evident how this came out. I don't really know how to do the corners, but I kind of just glued it. I use this Gorilla heavy duty adhesive contact spray glue stuff. It worked pretty good. It's very sticky. It's all over my hands. But yeah, time to flip it over and put it on the other side. Hopefully this side looks okay. I did it first and then I kind of folded the corners and tried to cut 45s into it and make it meet up properly. But again, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I think it's gonna work okay. And this is some really shitty carpet I got from Home Depot. All right, so once you get the floor done, it'll look great, but you'll have a big hole in the side like this. So that looks pretty nasty, right? So what I did to fix that was I used some thin wood. I don't know what thickness this stuff is. I just had it laying around. Really thin, soft plywood. And I cut a piece that looks like this, that covers the hole. And then I covered it with carpet and I left the top flap loose. And I'll show you why you leave that top flap loose. But you can see this would fit right here. That'd look a lot better, right? Well, what you can do is you can take this top flap and tuck it under this factory carpet. And then it looks like this, which is pretty sweet. So then I went through and I put 2 wood screws right there into that plastic. It bit pretty good. And on this side, I added a little block with 1 screw into the block. And then underneath there's a screw to the block too. So a little L bracket basically you could use. But I wanted the screws to come into it, so use a piece of wood. Yes, it's crooked, whatever. But let me show you how this looks once you install it. So I'm pretty happy with this. By the way, I'm not a woodworker. I do not do upholstery. I try to avoid this stuff because I'm a perfectionist. And once I start doing this, I spend way too much time on it. So I try to force myself to just get this kind of stuff done because my real skills and passion is not this kind of detail stuff. It's engines and shit like that. So once you get that all snapped in there, you can see that that looks a whole lot better than that. And this is, we're using the factory piece up here. Now, it's a little flimsy, you might say, right? Well, the solution for that is you put one screw into the end piece right here, tying it into here, and then it's actually all pretty solid. I think that looks pretty good. This whole job costs less than $100. That's including buying the carpet, buying drill bits, buying countersinking bits. Everything was like $100, almost exactly. Glue for the carpet, wood. Only saw I used was a table saw, and then there is some wood glue involved if you want to do that. But pretty happy with how it came out so far. All right, it's done. It was a lot of work, largely because I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to upholstery. But, you know, colors don't match. But I filled the hole in. And it's fairly sturdy, you know, as sturdy as the plastic that was there before. This is super sturdy. I can anchor to it. I ordered some little tie downs to put in the four corners of it. And it's 3/4 inch plywood, so self-tapping screws into there. Plenty strong tie down stuff like, you know, my box of come-alongs and tools or whatever. And I got a nice big flat floor. Now, of course, this all has to come out when I get my sound deadening I ordered to put underneath it, because I'm going to fill that 1 inch gap with sound deadening. Because why not? That space is down there, might as well use it. But to get it out is not bad. It's just these two 14mm bolts, which you can see I ground down nice and smooth, so stuff will slide over it. It won't pop my sleeping bag. And then you take out this one screw right here, grab this little strap, and you can yank the side pieces right off just like factory. Pro tip, when you've got to mount into a small piece of wood like this, always pre-drill your holes. I went through quite a few and I realized that cleaning up. Yeah. All right, so that's the second row seat, the middle and the side, the 60% side. It says SRS airbag on it. It had this fancy yellow high voltage looking connector, so I think there's actually an airbag in the seat assembly. And I think this is the heated seat connector. 77 pounds. Huge weight savings. Comes out really easy, as you'd expect. Everything on this truck so far nice to work on. But there's some foam down here, some insulation, so that's all got to go, and it's going to get replaced with some jute. It's kind of a weird little thing right there, a little drain, but a lot of storage in here now. It looks huge. And I'm going to take this platform and extend it totally flat here, make a bracket that'll bolt here and here, come up and meet it, and then also there's bolt holes back here I can use. These two are pretty close, so I'll probably just make a block that'll sit there, and my board will come in, and there'll be a bolt that'll go down through here, through that new board, and it'll block it together. And then there'll be a piece that sits underneath here to support this, because it can go down a little bit, because the other support's back where that bolt is. So I'll basically have this board here, come all the way to the door, mounted in 4 spots, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it'll have a lip underneath here when you install it to support that. Should be pretty easy. I can also get rid of the seat belt. That's the middle seat belt. Obviously got a vacuum under here and stuff, but pretty cool. Then I gotta figure out what I want to do with these two connectors here. But now there's going to be a significant amount of storage up in here, and once I remove this foam, a little bit of storage under there too, and you'll be able to access that storage from the sides. I could put a door in it, but I don't think I'm gonna even bother, because I'm gonna leave the side open here, so you can either get it from this side, get it from that side, or put the seat forward. All right, so with that second seat deleted, as expected, we have an airbag light. That's because, well, there's no airbag plugged into that harness. Yeah, it looks like a 2.2 ohm resistor, if you soldered in there, will turn out the airbag light. According to people on the internet, I'll try it out, and if it doesn't work, I'll let you know. All right, so I'm starting to work on the platform to fill in the 60% rear seat. The simplest way I think to do it is to make a spacer like this that bolts down to these 2 bolt holes. It's a nice flat spot there. It's fairly parallel with the surface of the deck. You see that there is some slight downhill there, which I cut into this block a little bit so that this should sit totally flat. That's my plan anyways. We'll see how it works out. All right, so that's bolted in there. 2 14mm bolts. It's extremely solid. And I did get a good amount of angle, so it's pretty parallel to this board. Close enough where I don't think it's going to make a difference. So most of the angle is going to be set by the height of this bracket. So as long as they meet at the same part on the board here, I think we'll be fine. But that's really solid. So once I put this board on here, there'll be probably 3 big bolts down into that, and good to go, obviously. So I just realized this seat reclines really far, like really far. And if you have it all the way down, that's gonna interfere with your deck no matter what. It'd be hitting like right here. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't wanna make your deck too far forward, otherwise you're gonna issues with that. So I'm making this video to try to remember how this lines up. So this board sticks out 2.5 inches from there. And if you measure from here, it starts at 9 inches and it goes to 20 inches. All right, so here's the final product for now. I say for now because I'm out of time today. So that block you saw we added there's 1, 2, 3 screws into that block. That block also sits under this guy. And then over here, there's a plate that goes like this. It's not hooked to the floor. It just has 3 bolts into here and 3 screws into here and 2 screws into here. That way these two are tied together perfectly flush. And then up front, I just have this big chunk of wood I had laying around the garage. It's got 2 bolts here. So it's a little flimsy on this side, but because it's tied in back there so good, you could stand on it. And this side too, because I need to put some better supports. My plan eventually is to get rid of the piece of wood, have a bracket that comes up this way to here, and there's another bolt over there, a bracket goes up that way, and make those out of steel. The reason I don't like the piece of wood here is because this wastes a bunch of space, right? I could slide a whole tool bag under here, but this is right in the middle of that area. It's wasting a good amount of space. So this got to go, and I'm just going to do some steel brackets here. But pretty happy with how it came out. Good bit of storage down here, and I have a totally flat, big surface to sleep on. And the whole thing costs 150 bucks or less. So pretty easy to do. You could do it cheaper if you had a better wood supplier than me. And my seats can go all the way back, fold all the way down, and nothing interferes, which is really what I wanted to achieve. So pretty sweet. And I didn't even go crazy measuring all this. I just kind of did it pretty quick and dirty. Came out okay. Oh yeah, so to get this height level, so it's all parallel, I actually jacked the back of the truck up until this backboard was level, threw a level on there, and then put a level on here, and ba-bam! Premium. I didn't want to lose any functionality from the front seats. So this is the seat all the way back, all the way down, and fully reclined. And you can see that it does hit it, but it's able to reach full recline. So that's about the best I could do and still be able to sleep here. I would like it to not touch, but it is fully maxed out. So pretty happy with that. The other seat right here, this guy still reclines fully and goes forward and back fully. It's all the way in the back position right there. Yeah, it's pretty functional. Now I have space for 3 passengers legally and 45 illegally.